hey, this is really good. Let's continue to monitor it and we'll do something about it next quarter. 5 quarters later, Zach's now working with the organization, and I look at the payment processing. And yes, they're only getting about 150 pieces of feedback a month about it, which is driving cart abandonment. But if you actually go into Adobe or Google Analytics and you look at the like for like on code, it wasn't just 100 customers, it was 10,000 customers, right? But only a small percentage of customers gave feedback. And so in total, it was a $50 million problem over those 14 months.
Hello, and welcome to the CX Files podcast. My name is Ben Foden, and today's guest is Zack Hamilton. Zack Hamilton is the creator of the Experience Performance System and author of a new book of the same title, which is apparently selling very well in 48 countries. His past experiences include the CXO role at Aaron's, leading the retail experience strategy at Medallia, and also as an executive leader at Forsta and Parcel Lab. He is the host of the popular podcast, and fair warning, there's going to be some adult language in this episode, popular podcast, Unfucking Your CX. He currently advises CX leaders and executives at global brands who are tired of the endless dashboards, useless metrics, and insight theater, and who want real impact instead. Zack eliminates customer friction, aligns CX to P&L outcomes, and builds systems that actually drive growth. Zack, thanks for coming on.
Hey, Ben, thanks for having me. Honored to be here and looking forward to our conversation.
Yeah, it was great to be a guest recently on your show as well. And I think you're leading such an important conversation. You have an important voice, which is just cutting through the nonsense. What is some nonsense or some surprise or something that really caught you off guard in the beginning of your career in CX?
Yeah, I think if you think about the beginning of my career in CX, I didn't set out to be a CX practitioner.
Mm-hmm.
Quite frankly, I didn't know what customer experience was. I was in retail operations at Aaron's. I was a store manager. And quite frankly, Ben, I was doing CX without knowing that I was doing CX. So as a store manager, every quarter we got a percentage of our profit, of our bottom line profit. And so I was always really curious about what are our customers experiencing with us inside of my four walls? What is it that I can control? I couldn't control the promotions or the branding or anything that Aaron's controlled from the corporate office. But what I could control was how did our customer feel when they walked into our store every single day? If they were late on their payment, did we treat them like a human being? Right? A lot of our customers had unfortunate things that happened to them. They lived paycheck to paycheck. They were going to miss payments. That was just the nature of our business. And so I was always looking at customer feedback. I was always praising our team members, especially when they got name dropped by a customer. I wanted to really celebrate them and celebrate them for going above and beyond. And look, that led us to being the top store. I became a multi-unit leader, VP of operations, where then I had 127 stores in my span and control. And that's when I made my way to the corporate office. And after leading strategic initiatives, that's when CX was dropped into my hands. And our CEO said, look, Zack, I know we have an NPS score. I'm not for sure if it's really good or not. And I'm thinking to myself at the time, it's a negative 27. It can't be that good. But I have no line of sight to what our customers are even saying. I've never seen a customer comment. And his feedback to me was, can you just bring some transparency to the business, to the executive leadership team of insights? And that is what I did, right? So my first executive leadership team meeting, it was about 6 to 8 weeks later. And I had a huge PowerPoint deck. I had NPS trend charts, CSAT trend charts, OSAT. I had my text analytics, my themes, my sentiment analysis. Like I had everything ready to show them. I had customer verbatims. And about 10 minutes in, they all looked bored. They were distracted. They were playing on their phones. And our CEO just kind of looked over at me and he said, so what? In that moment, Ben, like I'm thinking in my head, so what? Dude, you must be suffering from amnesia because this is exactly what you asked me. And I think the biggest lesson learned coming out of that was, the industry was really, in our discipline, was really built on information, right? So there's this piece around collecting insights, and then if you just quote unquote democratize, which I hate that word, but if you just democratize the insights in your dashboards, you're customer centric. Your cross functional partners will know what to do with the data, with the information. And so I thought I was operating at a high level, right? I was giving the organization something that they've never seen before, rich insights. And then I got hit with that so what, which ultimately was the hardest lesson learned. But it was the greatest thing that happened in my career, was that very first meeting. And I remember actually walking out of the meeting, and I was actually pretty upset, pretty pissed off. Like, I felt like I was set up for failure by my CEO of, this is what I wanted, I delivered it. But that's the only thing that he really knew. Like, he only knew
Mm-hmm.
about what the industry was saying. And I remember calling my mentor, David Beer, who's store operations leader, and I was telling him about the situation. And his nickname for me was Guido. And he said, listen, Guido, you're speaking customer experience. Those guys don't know NPS, CSAT, nothing. They only know P&L. You have to speak their language. If you want them to listen to you, next time you're in that meeting, you have to speak the language of executive leaders. And so those were the two, I think, very early lessons, very early on when CX was dropped into my lap of, I have to change the system in which we operated customer experience in.
Yeah. Wow, there's so much there. What a great trajectory, too, and a great place to get to that level of understanding of what is needed. I think a lot of us strike out with a good intention of, understand what the other party needs, right? The CEO in this case, and try to deliver that. And it's still not enough context in many cases. And we'll bring all these reports and the nitty gritty and the things that we see day to day. But you're right. I think you said something like you have to speak their language, and that language is P&L essentially at the executive level. It's high level, it's abstract, and it is dollars. And that's such an important lesson for people out there to translate. And you can justify and explain those connections. You can go from CSAT, NPS, handle time, cost per ticket, some of these things. You can go and you can start to tie them back. But I think that there's so many skills that are required, right? And you're demonstrating a lot of these very well. But what do you think about that, the evolving skill set of a CX leader, and like how has that changed over your career, and where's that going?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think the discipline has, when you think about the identity of a CX leader, I think the discipline and how we're perceived by our peers within our organizations are really around insight management, right? We're insight leaders, we're insight managers, we're voice of customer managers. So we manage insights and data. I initially wrote a blog about 4 years ago now on, what my role was inside the organization and how I perceived myself and how I rebuilt the identity as this leader of CX inside of Aaron's. And I really framed that around, I was the dot connector. So I connected the dots between what were our customers saying and feedback, no matter where we collected it across the journey, right? Or maybe even a post call from the contact center. But how do I recognize all these different patterns and how do I connect the dots to business impact? So I looked at myself as a dot connector, a translator, right? So translating customer to executive. I looked at myself as an influencer because ultimately, as a CX leader, as much power as I wanted within the organization, um, I didn't own really the P&L. I didn't own the resources that really actually had to do the work. All of my cross-functional partners did. So I was an influencer. I was a seller of change. So I looked at myself as almost like a seller on selling frictions that needed action to be owned by cross-functional partners. And then ultimately, how did I manage all of that. And so when I really think about those skill sets, those are still the skill sets that are absolutely needed as we think about the future of CX and where we're going. But I think I would also add a couple more skill sets. And so when we think long term around agentic CX or autonomous CX, ultimately, we're no longer going to be doing the managing. We're going to be optimizers. So we're going to constantly be feeding these agents data and key learnings and really drive optimization of those agents and all the data that they're leveraging. And I think the other key skill set is just financial and business acumen. I think that's the number one that I see so many leaders, CX leaders, fall down. And it's strange because I've talked to so many CX leaders, I coach so many. And one of the first questions I'll ask them, Ben, is like, when was the last time you read your company's 10K or listened to an earnings call? Like, I never have. And I'm like, if you don't know how your business makes money, how are you going to drive impact of making, right?
Right.
And so a lot of people will push back. I think the disciplines also got stuck in this identity of um, we're the fighters for people, right? Like we're the martyrs that we're fighting for our customers and we're advocates. And somehow profitability and performance became dirty words in CX. If we really think about the fundamental of CX has always been a performance metric, always. And so I'm not one of those advocates against profitability when you think about business acumen and how do you drive results, right? I think if you're truly advocating for your customer, then you're essentially advocating for the business to fix the frictions that are going to, one, deliver value to the customer, but also deliver value to the business, right? I think it's actually profits through people, because if your business isn't profitable, it's not going to be around long term. And I think these are the skill sets that are significantly overlooked. You can't find them in normal college education. You don't find them on the CXPA exam for our discipline. But these are such critical skills that you need to really win through influence inside your organization.
Absolutely. I think the meta skills of career, of influence, of internal salesmanship, these are absolutely critical skills. And maybe that's even more so for CX given its kind of position and as to your experience, the need to work with cross-functional partners, the reality that a lot of CX leaders don't own their P&L. I think that's a challenging environment for anybody, but there are resources and there are voices out there and consultants and help to cover those bases. I feel like the modern landscape is shifting so quickly. And it's all of those meta things that we're talking about around career and business acumen generally. But when you look at the specific day to day, where is it breaking down, right? What are the repeating stumbling blocks in the actual discipline, not the career and
Yeah.
salesmanship side, but the actual discipline? Because just personally as a consumer, I have experienced so many broken CX, so many broken customer experiences that just they I've made a post about this recently, but if your business is diverting customers away from the channel that they started on against their will,
Yeah.
if you're forcing them into channels they don't want to use against their will, if you're not responsive, essentially, you're sending a message that you don't care. And even if you're saving money by like deflecting or whatever, you might be losing more in trust and retention and customers who don't come back. So, like, where's the stumbling blocks here, and why is it that so much CX is still broken?
This is such a loaded question, Ben. I think there's a few things. I think the first piece is really around we're just measuring the wrong things. When I first started leading CX, I was told every organization's North Star should be Net Promoter Score (NPS).
Mm,
And if you really think about that metric, and I'm sure I know I've gotten some hate mail about my position on NPS, but NPS is an advocacy metric. It's not a revenue metric.
mm,
It's an advocacy metric, right? If you actually read the question. Um, and so, one, we get so consumed with vanity metrics. So NPS, CSAT, OSAT, customer effort score, you name it, right? Contact centers thinking about um, average handle time, for example, which is great, right? If you don't measure it, it's not going to matter. I hear all those things, blah, 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 blah. But none of those things really help you drive customer centricity. So if you really think about it, the metric that you should be focused on is customer lifetime value, especially for B2C. In financial services, it could be assets under management, it could be net revenue retention, like if you're in software, for example. Those are all lifetime value metrics. And so if you really think about it, if you consistently deliver great experiences over time, you make that connection, you earn loyalty, you should see those metrics improve, right? Your lifetime value just gets stronger. So I think the first thing is we're measuring the wrong thing. So then, of course, we're goal setting on the wrong thing. I think
It
other
kind of flows
piece
from
is
that.
our technology platforms have essentially become our CX strategies. And so, because of that, we look at outputs versus outcomes, right? So, from an
Mm,
output, it's thinking about I'm going to launch new engagement touch points. I'm going to refine my survey to increase response rates, right? So, now my strategy is I'm going to increase my response rates. I'm going to increase truly the number of pieces of feedback that I get throughout an entire year. We think about I'm going to redesign these dashboards. We have very low adoption on the dashboards. I'm going to redesign those. I'm going to do a text analytics model refresh, right? So I'm going to update my text analytics model. We have some emerging topics that are happening. So we're going to tag those. We're going to create a model for it. Those are all outputs on a platform that, again, don't drive the business. So that's the other thing is we're fixated with outputs versus what are the outcomes that we are driving? And so to your point, you're experiencing a lot of just dead ends and really just broken systems. And I think that's why we're now in this era of the friction economy, where
mm,
every business claimed to be that they were a technology company, right? During the pandemic. And so everyone was working within their own technology silos. They or adding parts, redesigning parts of the customer journey. So inherently, none of these technologies are really connected. And we're not really working cross functionally. So we're creating all these frictions within the customer journey that we don't intend to do it, but unintentionally we create a significant amount of friction within the business that our customers experience. And if you really think about friction, yes, there's positive friction that you can add to an experience and it can create a great experience. Don't get me wrong. Like, I completely understand that. But if you think about the unintended friction that doesn't add value to a customer, to your point, sending them down channels that they don't want to go down into, my login not working multiple times and I can't get immediate help on it, I can't get a promo code to apply to my checkout, thinking about holiday shopping. These are all frictions that we look at them case by case and we don't get to the root cause and assign a value to that specific friction. And so what ends up happening is these frictions start to cost seven figures to the business. And now the friction has actually now significantly outgrown customer acquisition. And I'll give you an example. I was working with a client a couple months ago who I started to go in and dig into the data, and they've had promo code issues for the last 14 months. Everyone knew that, sorry, payment processing issues. Sorry. So everyone knew that they had a payment processing issue with a specific type of mobile device, right? They were getting feedback on it every single month. And every single month, the CX leader would say, hey, look, our customers continue to be pissed off. We have payment timeout issues. They have error processing. They don't know if their purchase went through or not. It's debiting money from their account, but then putting it right back. So they don't know if it's all these things are happening.
mm-hmm.
What she continued to get told was, hey, this is really good. Let's continue to monitor it and we'll do something about it next quarter. 5 quarters later, Zach's now working with the organization and I look at the payment processing. And yes, they're only getting about 150 pieces of feedback a month about it, which is driving cart abandonment. But if you actually go into Adobe or Google Analytics and you look at the like for like on code, it wasn't just 100 customers, it was 10,000 customers, right? But only a small percentage of customers gave feedback. And so in total, it was a $50 million problem over those 14 months. And I remember doing this readout with the CEO, and she said, "Why hasn't anyone brought this up to me?" And the CX leader's like, "I've been talking about this every month." And so she looked at the CIO and was like, "What's it going to cost to fix this?" And he's like, "It's probably a $30,000, whatever it was." And she's like, "That's it? I would have given you $5 million to go solve this problem, knowing that this is costing us 50 million over 14 months." And so that's been why I believe we're in this friction economy where friction is now weighed the customer acquisition cost. And quite frankly, when we get all that unintended friction, we are no longer loyal. A defect and we're going to go to a new brand, right? Brands who are doing a really great job of creating better experiences. And look, think about it. With our smartphone devices and with, us being an economy addicted to TikTok and Instagram Reels and Facebook Reels, our loyalty changes about every 6.5 seconds, right? Consumer behavior is moving faster than what it's ever been before. I can visit 15 brands in 10 minutes on my device. I don't have to go to a shopping mall. And those are the things that are impacting our discipline. All this consumer behavior shifting, friction costs has now outgrown customer acquisition cost, but CX leaders are still focused on how's my NPS high, how's my CSAT, and all the outputs around what they believe is their strategy, which is their VOC platform.
Yeah, God, you're making so many good points here. I'm left listening to this. I'm at once shocked by the $50 million number. That's incredible. But I think I'm shocked is I'm excited by the scope of the opportunity that
Yeah.
is in front of CX right now. I think that there has never been a time when there are more tools, more resources, more knowledge available, and the scope of the role has never had a better place at the table. There's never been more respect for VOC,
Yeah.
and there's never been more respect for leaders that can tie it to the outcome.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I think the opportunity's there. I think those CX leaders, I also see us kind of playing the victim trap a lot of, which is also holding the discipline back of my executive leadership team just doesn't believe in customer experience. And I would call BS on that because at one time, he or she did. Your CEO, she did. That's why you have a job. She invested in you and your team and the millions of dollars that you're spending on your tech stack. The problem is we've never showed up with receipts, right? Never
Right.
delivered value back into the business. And so it wasn't that they didn't care, they just lost trust. And so I think to your point, when you think about this significant opportunity that's at our feet right now and ahead of us, the biggest thing it's going to take, and I truly believe this, is an identity change.
Mm.
We have to view ourselves differently, right? And so I think there's also one, that identity crisis that we've already talked about. I think there's this other piece of fear of messing up, right? So here's my current status quo. I may not have a large team, but as long as I get my monthly or quarterly NPS insight report out, I'm not going to get fired. Now, my team may not grow. My responsibilities aren't going to grow. Um, the investment in tools that I need to enable my strategy is probably not going to get grow. It's probably just going to get cut back. But there's that fear of messing up that if I radically change our internal system and the way that we operate, if I don't deliver a win, I'm gonna lose my job. And that, I'm not saying that fear is not there, but what I'm saying is it first starts with the identity of who we are as CX leaders and what we are capable of. Um, and then it is having the courage to say, this insights management system is no longer serving us. The Marie Kondo, right? Think it's for its purpose and then let it go. And now let's build a new system. That's essentially, we need to Marie Kondo the heck out of CX. And we need to think traditional experience management for its purpose, that it for the last 10 or 15 years. But now we need to move forward from traditional experience management.
The life-changing magic of tidying up your identity as a CX leader.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. Oh, that's a great analogy. And I like the simplification piece here too, right? You've had this theme in a few of your comments today of don't focus on this thing that you've been focused on. Focus in on this piece, which is where you need to be, and let the other things go,
Yeah.
right? It's time to shed the old way of doing things. And I think I'd like to take it even a little bit further. And you're talking about this sort of the fear of being held responsible for bad results, the fear of getting attacked as the messenger, right?
Yeah.
The bearer of bad news. And I think that actually it is better, and this may be controversial, but I think it's better to dig deeper into the pain, dig deeper into the problems, and lead with those.
Yeah.
So if you bring a very bad quote from a customer, from a ticket or from an interaction, you say, this is a terrible experience that this customer had. Here's what this is costing us,
Yeah.
right? And here's some ideas, or let's have a discussion about how to fix this. That, like, it's counterintuitive, but I think digging into the bad parts gives you an opportunity to get to the best parts. And so going negative can be a positive. What do you think about like this idea of not shying away from it, but actually highlighting here's a very bad thing, and of course offering a suggestion and quantifying it?
Yeah, I think you're spot on here, right? I think customer feedback is a gift, whether it's positive feedback or negative feedback. It's a gift to your organization. And if I think about in just my span of 5 years of leading CX at Aaron's, we ended up delivering about $120 million of impact into the P&L, validated by our CFO. And what we did was very simply that. We really leaned into all the negative friction that's happening. There's also positive friction. If we were testing something, if we saw that it was delivering the experience, the desired experience, and the behavior changes were happening within the customer base, we try and accelerate it. But most of our time was with the experiences that broke down and created customer friction, that negative sentiment. And
Yeah.
when I first started on this journey, everyone was like, you have to be a really good storyteller. And I agree with that. I think storytelling it's a skill set that maybe I didn't name earlier, but it's a skill set that's so important. But the storytelling that we're doing as customer experience leaders is our customers are really pissed off because of X, Y, and Z. They're really unhappy with this. They're not, which is great. But if you really want it to have teeth within your organization, you have to make it meaningful for them. And meaningful for them is the P&L. And this is where I created the CX case maker when I was at Aaron's to help drive and influence prioritization. Was I loved a game of Mad Libs when I was in elementary school. Like I loved that. It was one of my favorite parts
Mad
of the
Libs are
day.
great.
And
Yeah.
so I essentially created a Mad Libs problem framing statement to help CX leaders frame that negative sentiment into a problem statement. You're still storytelling, right? That is the part of storytelling. And so if you really think about how we communicate, language is a really good way to see how that person is thinking. And I ran this exercise last night with a group of CX leaders where I had them pull out like their last monthly or quarterly report. And what I wanted them to do was in one color, I had them highlight all of the CX language. So NPS, CSAT, sentiment, all those things. And then in another color, I wanted them to highlight business. So anything around the P&L, revenue, cost, like all risk, all those things. And I call this the wee wee syndrome. So it was all about us and customer experience. And if you looked at the ratio, most of them last night was 95% CX,
Oh
5%
no.
business. And so
5%?
and so what we did was we spent time with them helping them and it was everyone was like, look, this is what I thought I should be doing. This is me trying to tell a story within our organization. And so we help them reframe parts of their reports into um, that business problem. Did that last night. Everyone said, oh my gosh, I cannot wait to take this to my leaders tomorrow. I can't wait to share this because they're going to
Yes.
get it. Right. And it goes back to that example that I share with that CEO. She'd been hearing every month about payment processing issues, but no one really put it in context, right? Yes, the CX leader was telling the story, but no one put it in the context that made sense to the CEO. And until we framed it up in a different way, we framed the story in a different way, did she actually get it? And so I think criticality piece of this is there's so much negative friction in your business. Just start with go find your top 5 negative topics or themes in your text analytics dashboard and frame them out into problems. Use the Mad Lib, frame them out into problems. And I can tell you, your prioritization sessions will go much differently the next time.
Yeah, wow. It's such a great example with 95% versus 5%. And I think that's probably not unique to the group of executives that were with you. I think that's probably common. And if people, I'm certainly not the originator of this idea, but start from the result and work backwards. A piece of this, it's like start with the revenue number or the loss number, the profit or the loss in the beginning up front, and then say, okay, here's where this is coming from. Here's how we measured this. Here's the root cause. Don't start on the other side, start from the result and then work backwards. And it'll just, of course, if a CEO's listening for dollar signs, their ears are
Yeah.
gonna perk up from the beginning. I wanted to switch gears a little bit
Yeah.
here and talk to you about where you see things are going. What do you see on the horizon for 2026? And of course, we have to address AI and all of the promises and fairy dust around it versus what is the reality.
Yeah. Look, I think we can handle both of them in this conversation. Like, I really believe, I'm a huge believer in agentic CX and autonomous CX. Like, I truly believe um, that is the future. I've been asked so many times if I went back into retail as a CX leader, what would the DNA of my team look like? And my feedback has been, look, I would have agents pointed at business outcomes, and my team would no longer be dashboard jockeys. They wouldn't be insight managers. They would be agent optimizers. And so when I really think about just AI today, I think about AI as like the new NPS, right? 15, 20 years ago, when Fred Reichheld first came out with NPS, everyone had to have one. We have to have an NPS, right? My buddies on the golf course, they're talking about it. I've got to have one too. And so I think as the world continues to adopt tools like ChatGPT, everyone truly believes, hey, if I just plug our business into AI, it's magically going to solve everything. And that couldn't be further from the truth. It's just going to escalate chaos. And
Hmm.
so when I think about agentic CX and I think about autonomous CX, so I have some clients who we're building their agents, but I believe it's a step in the maturity that you mature into, right? It's a model that you mature into. But first, your organization has to have a performance system built internally where it is human led before you can apply an agent to it, right? Because agents are going to make you make decisions all day, every day, very quickly, right? They're constantly going to be they want to learn, they want to optimize if you're going to do it the right way, right? As an organization, if it takes you a long time to make decisions, stay away from AI because it's only going to force, or I should say, stay away from agentic CX. It's only going to force you into making more decisions. The only thing that you will do is create a significant amount of chaos. Then you will unplug it, quote unquote, unplug it. Um, and that initial optimism that you have um, will now be depleted. If you look at that recent MIT study, I think we've all seen it, 85% of these initial AI or agentic strategies have failed. The reason for that is they don't have a performance system underneath of it that's currently being human led to where now you can apply agentic to it. So I'm a huge believer in it. There is that, I think the other challenge to your point of this magic fairy dust or pixie dust is there's so much funding out there for startup companies who are AI led. So now every technology company, whether you have AI or not, is AI led, which I think is
Mm-hmm.
freaking hilarious. And there's this race to you see the tremendous amount of funding for Chat GPT and some of these other leaders like Anthropic and others. And so there's this race to get that funding. And so when you really look at that go-to-market messaging from all these technology companies, it's it's AI first, it's agentic first. They're promising some insane amount of returns. And most often it's in the contact center. But when I really think about the contact center, everyone's, oh, our agentic bot now is handling first contact resolutions dropped by 80%. Look at all the operational efficiency. That's great. But then if you look at the trailing 6 months that agent has been put into place, they're only, it's essentially one big containment loop, right? They're just containing issues. And so the same issues that 6 months ago, that agentic bot, quote, handled, they're the same issues coming in. And so what's
Right.
happening is your business is never getting to the root cause of that negative friction, which is causing calls or chats or emails in your contact center. And so you're still delivering a really crappy experience on the forefront and you're only containing issues on the back end. And so what needs to happen is that agent, not only do you have an agent that needs to be able to take action and resolve those issues, but you have to have the agent learn, right? To be able to say, okay, here's what's causing this. This is the root cause. We've got to go fix this in the business. So to me, that's where I think the pixie dust comes in is companies are sold these large operational efficiency stats. And companies believe in the hype, especially those companies who their CEOs are trying to survive quarter to quarter. They'll do anything to get that level of ops efficiency because then you can wipe out 20, 30% of your FTE, save a couple $1 million, put that to the bottom line. And now, short term, you've just delivered win to your shareholders. Long term, you just screwed the company.
Yeah, there's so many lessons there. I feel like you're absolutely right on a lot of these points. I think the point about being ready or not and knowing what readiness looks like, doing the self-reflection, the internal analysis, the having the awareness to say, look, we're not ready for this today. Here's what we need to get in place. It's hard, right? Amidst this environment, there's so much hype and excitement, and we don't want to get left behind and all of that. But I think that the savviest players are going beyond here's a tool, and they're going into here's how this fits.
Mm.
And my hope is that becomes more and more the case. And I think a lot of these AI companies, I work for one of them, a lot of them are going to get exposed for basically overpromising and
Yeah.
underdelivering. The MIT study is a striking example, but I think it is a two-way street. You could have the best vendor in the world, but if you're not there as an organization, you're not ready. Whose responsibility is that? I mean, there's all kinds of AI readiness frameworks, and there's ways that you can approach this. It's not like a secret,
Yeah.
but yeah, wow, Zach, so much valuable information here. I think people have got some real questions to ask, some homework to do, and hopefully some lessons learned from this episode. Yeah, this is great. So if you want to connect with Zach, if you want to hire him as a consultant, it's Zack Hamilton on LinkedIn. His new book is out now, The Experience Performance System, and check it out and you won't be disappointed. So that's all for this episode of the CX Files. Thank you. See you next time.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Ben. Cheers.